Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all three past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code ONEFREEPP for a free single card today.
Thanks so much for joining us here on the Daily Racing Forum YouTube. I'm Gino Buccola alongside David Aragona. We're going to take a look at race number 10 on Saturday at Belmont at the Big A. It's the Athenia Stakes. Before we do, though, we just want to encourage you to head on down below and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's a big help for us, and we have a big week coming up with Breeders' Cup in just a few. David, let's take a look at this field for the Athenia. Purse $150,000 on the turf, fillies and mares, 3-year-olds and up. They'll go a mile and an eighth. And here's a look at the field, and I thought a pretty evenly matched group, to be honest. I thought there were 3 or 4 horses who would all take some support. Spirit and Glory makes a lot of sense. You have a horse like Child in the Moon, who's kind of a new face. 3 Priest did nothing wrong in that U.S. debut. Prerequisite, Papilio fit very well at this level. I thought a pretty competitive group here.
Yeah, sometimes you get afraid that these races are going to come up very undersubscribed with only one trainer dominating. That's not the case here. I've got 8 runners signed on for turf, 7 different barns that they're hailing from. Chad Brown does have 2 in here, and you can see from my morning line that they're both contenders in this race, but I didn't think either one was a standout. You can make a case for a lot of runners in this field.
Well, let's see what Timeform US thinks as far as the pace projector is concerned and how this race will set up. It doesn't surprise me there to see Spirit and Glory forwardly placed. Prerequisite has been close in just about each of his starts so far, David, each of her starts. So I'd imagine those two, while not necessarily need the lead horses, they will want to put themselves close up early on in here.
Yeah, Spirit and Glory this year has turned into a horse that has become effective as a front runner. Didn't really get the chance to show that style last time at Kentucky Downs when she was off a bit slowly, but I would imagine Jose Lozcano getting back aboard here will be aggressive once again, as he has been in the past. Prerequisite has done some of her best running on the front end, but I wouldn't be surprised to see her stalking in here. She's had success using that style in the past, and Flavien Prat might be content to take up a spot just outside of the number 2.
Let's go through this field horse by horse, and let's start with the number 1, Tufani, who comes over from Colonial off of back-to-back victories, has done some good work over at Fairgrounds also in turf route races, and has always been a pretty honest Virginia bred. I mean, 6 for 11, so a horse who sure knows how to win races. This is probably a little bit tougher than what she's faced throughout the bulk of her career, but it feels like a nice logical step up into this spot for her to kind of get an acid test and see where she stacks up.
Yeah, there's some temptation to get lured in by this horse because when you watch her wins, she's really visually impressive, and she's got a nice turn of foot on her, and she's made some horses look very ordinary in her last couple of starts. But then you go in DRF Formulator and look through those fields, and those horses are pretty ordinary. And I think she's facing up, stepping up against some horses that are a little tougher this time. And she's tried tougher company in a couple of races last year at Fairgrounds coming off those 2 victories, didn't quite class up. I'm a little skeptical that she's going to be able to handle the step up in class here either.
Well, she'll probably be coming from way out of it. One of the horses that'll be more forwardly placed is the number 2, Spirit and Glory, who is a multiple stakes winner, multiple graded stakes placed. And if you can eliminate that race at Kentucky last time out, and plenty of horses just don't take to that turf course, her races prior to that, 3 in a row, were all pretty good. In fact, she won a race at Aqueduct. It's probably pretty comparable to this. It was just a field of 4, but from a class level, this type of a stakes race, how do you think Spirit and Glory fits with this group?
I think Spirit and Glory is kind of the horse to beat in this race and probably won't go favored because she never goes favored. She never really gets the respect that she deserves, but she's run well a number of times this year. I can easily excuse the last start at Kentucky Downs where, like I said, she broke about a half step slowly, couldn't get forward the way that she wants to, and from there was just kind of chasing wide every step of the way. And that was one of those races at Kentucky Downs where it just seemed like there was this conveyor belt along the inside path, and everyone who was successful in that race was down towards the inside where she was not. But her prior 3 races, they're all good, especially that Bogey 3 back where she was dueling on the front end with eventual grade 1 winner White Beam. Couldn't quite get by that foe. They both were picked up by Nice and Marie at the end, but she was right there in the photo at the finish. If she runs that well, getting back over this Aqueduct course, she's probably going to win this race.
Second start back off that short little break for her, top tier contender in this one. Let's move along to Edict, who will be making first start since December and her first start in the U.S. Now, she goes out for a barn, David. That can get horses ready off a long layoff, but the tab is a little bit spotty for a horse who's making their first U.S. start, for a horse who's coming off such a long layoff. I do have some question marks and some concerns about edict in here, the multiple Group 1 winner over in Argentina.
Yeah, I recall we talked about this horse about a month ago when we did our preview of the Noble Damsel. She was entered in that race, was scratched. She also had been entered to make her U.S. debut at Saratoga in an allowance race, was scratched as a vet scratch that day. So it seems like she's had some trouble actually making it to the starting gate. And you could see, as you said, some gaps in her work tab. So there have been some interruptions getting her to this point. I'm kind of inclined right now to just give her a race in this country. I do think she's got talent because you watch her races in Argentina and she shows real grit to win. I mean, she's won a couple of Group 1s in a row, so you know that she's a nice horse. Just feels like you might want to give her one start to acclimate.
Child of the Moon is the next one up, coming off of a win on September the 2nd over at Saratoga, was about 10 lengths off and showed some gradual improvement on the outside, made a big wide move here as we see down the center of the stretch, David, and really got going late.
Yeah, this was an impressive late run. The pace did really work out for her this day. They went a pretty honest clip up front, and it was sort of coming apart at the end. The runner-up, I actually thought, might have run the best race of anybody, Mystify, who is pretty game holding on for second here. But it was still a good effort by Child of the Moon, and I even thought her U.S. debut was a good performance because there was no pace on that day, and she was closing best of all at the end. I do think that this is a much tougher race than the first level allowances that she's coming out of, but Chad Brown shows the confidence to bypass an N2X allowance to run her in this stakes instead, so I think you've got to respect that move.
Yeah, and the race has come back extremely live. I think beat 3 next out winners, the 5th, 7th, and 8th place finishers won next out. Mystifying came back, I think, to run second in the next start. So just a good group so far. David, I think one of the top players in here comes in from Kentucky, makes the second start in the U.S. That is the number 5, 3 Priest, the Japanese bred runner, who was a very good third in the ladies marathon behind Nisi Marie, who we just spoke about earlier on in the running lines of one of these rivals. So 3 Priest now, second time in the U.S. How do you think she fits with this group?
Yeah, I've got to say, I wasn't thrilled with her form overseas. I just thought she was a horse that was really hard to peg from a class standpoint, and they had been running her much longer distances, 1.5 miles in her recent races over there. They cut her back a little bit last time at Kentucky Downs, and I thought it was a pretty good performance. Nisi Marie just better than the horse that she was facing that day, and 3 Priest was trying to find a way through along the inside. She kind of followed Vergara through a hole and then had to alter course around that foe late and was still finishing at the end. I don't mind her turning back a little bit to the 1.125 if she does run here. She is cross-entered in the Dowager on Sunday at Keeneland, going the 1.5 mile distance. So it seems like even the connections are trying to decide if she wants to go longer or shorter. I think this is probably the better spot for her, and she looms as a contender if she runs here instead.
Yeah, likely to show some improvement too. Second start in the U.S. Now in the Motion Barn, both positives there. Prerequisite, the number 6, feels like one of the horses they'll all have to catch in here. She doesn't need the lead, but she can be forwardly placed. And if you are able to be forgiving for the Lake Placid race, which is the one that sent her to the long layoff. And honestly, on speed figures, she didn't even run all that poorly that day. But if you just want to eliminate that race because she finished 5th and you look at the body of her work other than that, it's really, really good. She just did not really fire all that much in her debut when finishing 4th. The other 3 starts were excellent. Then she comes back off the long layoff, shows a little bit of improvement, shows a little bit of development. And she might be a pretty nice horse who has a high ceiling and can step forward in the coming months. What do you think about Prerequisite second start off the bench?
She might be. I kind of am of two minds about her. I wasn't thrilled with this return race. Not that she did anything wrong. I mean, she did what was required to beat this field. I just didn't think a whole lot of the horses that were behind her this day.
Yeah.
She got bet down to 6-5 for a reason, even though she was coming off such a long layoff. There just wasn't a whole lot of form in this race. The runner-up did come back to finish second again in a race at Aqueduct, but regressed a little bit from a buyer standpoint and got a very good trip, and it was a weaker field. So I don't really know what to make of the last race. I do like her 3-year-old form better than her recent performance, though, because she got an impossible trip in that Lake Placid that you were mentioning. For whatever reason, Irad came out of the gate with the intent to rate her that day and ended up in one of those indecisive trips where he was caught 3 to 4 wide around both turns. That's not the way that this filly wants to be ridden. They're probably going to be more aggressive this day, and she's had success doing that in the past. I just wonder if she's taken that step forward from 3 to 4. She's got to prove it to me. And with Flavian Pratt getting aboard here, I wonder what kind of price she's going to be.
And when you see a horse miss so much time, you really don't know. Is there more maturity built in there, or is it the same sort of horse from last year running those same types of races? It's sometimes hard to to gauge in their first start off the bench, this is really the time that we'll tell. Because if there's not a whole lot of improvement on the Beyer scale, the Beyer speed figure scale, or we don't see that much better race, then yeah, you're right. Maybe a horse who kind of just fits at these lower level stakes ranks and not one that will necessarily step up all that much. The number 7, Papilio, is a grade 2 winner and multiple graded stakes placed. David, for the bulk of her career, she's faced graded stakes companies, so this is probably a softer spot than she's been in a lot of her recent races. Completely missed the break 2 starts back on July the 20th at Monmouth Park, and then last time out was over at Kentucky. So, you have to go to the last 2 races and eliminate them, but I think you can be forgiving and make some excuses for those last 2.
She is a horse that seems to have more trips than your typical horse, and I think she makes her own trouble in some instances because she can be a little slow out of the gate. That's just her, and she is a horse that comes from off the pace, and you need to get some luck with trips to be successful when you're closing from the back of the pack. But she has had some legitimate trips. You noted a couple of them. Going all the way back to the Modesty earlier this year, you could argue watching that race that she should have won because she was never towards the inside. That was a race that was won by a horse that got a perfect trip, and she was completely held up in traffic in upper stretch. I thought that she ran very well to win that allowance race next time at Churchill, as you noted, off very slowly in that matchmaker at Monmouth, and furthermore, not noted in the trouble line, but she got completely steady just prior to the quarter pole and lost momentum at a point in the race when you could not afford to do so because they just sprinted home at the end of that spot. And then last time at Kentucky Downs, not a whole lot of pace on. That race was completely dominated on the front end. Again, she was off a bit slowly, but then she was just placed 4 wide with no cover around the far turn at the back of the pack. She was never going to win with that trip. She is a lot better than she looks based on her recent results. And I kind of think she might be the best horse in this race, and she might not go favored.
Yes, the key for me with her is what kind of price will she be come post time? Because if she is where you're saying like 4-1, 5-1, she might be the horse to bet in this race. She may be the value of this race because we know she has a really high ceiling, and sometimes those muddied up races will just get you a little bit more value. And some of the trip players who like you and I, David, who maybe have played her a few times, are like, okay, I'm done this time. Maybe we give Papilio one more shot if the price makes sense. Let's round out the body of this field here with 30 Thou Kelvin, who's a multiple stakes winner, the outside draw. So you feel like they'll probably have to be forwardly placed, which is something that Kelvin has done a few times. 2-back winner at Saratoga. That was a career best effort on August the 14th. That race would stack up pretty well on the speed figures with a lot of these. I just don't know how good this horse really is, though, 30 Thou Kelvin, as he steps up.
Yeah, I personally didn't see how she won that race at 25-1 2-back. I mean, maybe that was a little bit too high of a price on her, paying over $50. But you go back and look through the field that day, and I think we've talked about Midnight Mile and some other stakes previews. She's just a horse that does not want to get her picture taken. So I don't want to give 30 Thou Kelvin too much credit for beating that foe. She had no chance last time, stretching out to 1.5 miles. I don't know what kind of spot, what she was doing in there. This is a better race for her. I just feel like there might be slightly better horses this time.
The couple to the outside are main track only. So as we round out the field that's on the grass, let's take a look at our selections for this one, David, for the $150,000 Athenia. Lots of similarities. You see the same 4 numbers that we have, just in different spots. You're going to put Papilio on top. What would be like a playable price for you with Papilio on the win end?
I think she's the most likely winner of this race. And for me, that's somewhere in the 3-1, 5-2 range. I think that makes sense for her because I believe her ceiling is a little higher than everybody else in this field. And I also think she might finally get the right pace set up in here because we didn't mention it earlier, but Edict, who we don't really like in this race, she's a horse that showed a lot of speed in Argentina. So she might be able to mix up this pace scenario as well. And I think if they go an honest clip up front, she'll come running at the end under Dylan Davis.
Yeah, we were looking at the Timeform US projectors earlier. We saw Spirit and Glory up front. We saw Prerequisite up front, but that wild card of Edict throwing into the mix. You even have horses like 30 Thou Kelvin, who you can see wanting to be a little more forwardly placed. It could be honest in here, and it could set up for some horses who want to come from off the pace. So for David, that's the 7 Papilio. I'll put the 5-3 Priest on top. 5-6, 7-2 for me. 7-2, 5-6 for David. But the important part is you. So however you're playing them on Saturday, we wish you the best of luck.
Hey, buddy. Let me tell you something. If you really enjoyed this great content, just click the like and subscribe button right here. And if you enjoy the race of the day, stakes previews and lots more starring me, please click right here. You're not gonna regret it.